All right. Welcome, everyone, to another episode of Behind the Human. I'm your host, Mark Champagne, and it's my job to unpack the stories and mental fitness practices of people living at the top of their game, personally and professionally. Today, we have such a beautiful, stunning, brilliant human, Chrisette, on the show, who is a Grammy Award-winning recording artist who has collaborated with hip-hop icons like Jay-Z, Rick Ross, and Nas, as well as R&B soul singers such as John Legend and Music Soul Child. Chrisette has also performed internationally from South Africa to Amsterdam and has been invited to sing at the White House multiple times by former President Barack Obama. In addition to her musical achievements, Chrisette has been involved in various initiatives, including partnering with the American Heart Association and VH1 Save the Music to raise awareness about healthcare and education disparities. She has empowered young people through motivational speaking engagements at universities like Harvard and has made an impact at women's empowerment and entrepreneurial events. She has also focused on promoting inner peace and mental wellness, earning her Yoga Association teacher training certification and organizing wellness events through her Soft Life Circle gatherings. Who are you?
People say I'm not what I do, but you are what you do. And if you aren't, then you're not doing it. So I am a young lady who's sang at the White House multiple times. I am a girl who's traveled all over the world and continues to do so. I am a Grammy Award-winning recording artist. And that is how I spend my day. That's how I spend my time all the time.
Yeah.
And you don't realize it, sometimes when you're doing it because you're creating as you go. The easiest way to describe myself is a creative.
Well, I was going to say, because those are the things you're doing, and it's incredible that you're doing the things that, light you up and you're meant to be doing. But I guess what I wonder is, like, what are some of those characteristics behind that if you weren't traveling the world and you're doing other things like those, I mean, the creative aspect, obviously, I feel like would surface, but I'm curious, like, what are those things that like those fundamental characteristics of who Chrisette is? Like, what are those?
A people lover, super curious, annoyingly inquisitive, always in a state of wonder at every moment of the day. It gets on people's nerves. So I often say, if I'm asking too many questions, tell me to stop. I pick up dirt in different cities to see what's in the soil. I am the epitome of curious. Yeah.
Well, you've come to the right place. I mean, this is a show all about good questions and someone who studies questions for a living. So I'm all about that. What was life?
And with human beings, with human beings, I think, so my idea is that, or just an idea is that the beginning of love is the ability to see. And so with humans, seeing and curiosity, I think, is a measure of love, or the beginnings of it. And then the doing part is the action of love. So yeah, being curious is probably my love language.
Yeah. And were you always like that as a kid as well?
Annoyingly, yeah. They call it social butterfly in school, but it was a myriad of questions, and it was staying after school in certain classes like English and art and music, just to ask more questions. Biology. So, what do you mean?
Yeah. And so, how did it all begin? Like, a Grammy is huge. There's so many people that have, that as an objective, and to land a recording deal and all of that. And I mentioned some people that you've collaborated with, many, but these are people that, like, wow. I mean, I would say, many humans that have the opportunity to shift culture. I mean, and that's a lot of influence with your art and your work. So how did it all begin for you? Like, where did it start?
So I was in college. For vocal jazz performance, and I had been studying jazz since I was a little kid, playing the saxophone from the time I was 8, inspired by like the Blues Brothers and Art Blakey and Sarah Vaughan and hip hop. So it was this
Okay.
this myriad of classical theater background, jazz and hip hop that led me to go to school. I didn't want to go to school. I wanted to ask questions from the world. I wanted to go outside. I felt like it was
Mm.
finally playtime for real at 18 years old. But I went to school instead and I got to study theory, which is one of my favorite music subjects because it is how chords are created and what they reveal, how they make people feel, and then what kind of melodies you can put on top. So that songwriting experience and that immersion in songwriting and the writing of music from Bach to Beyonce. It made me be still with lyrics, and it made me be really still with melody. And I fell deeply in love with melody. And what I found culturally was that certain melodies are more popular in certain cultures. And
Okay.
I hadn't realized that. I didn't realize that Sarah McLachlan was white and
Okay.
Beyonce was Black. And in the music business, they call that the difference between mainstream music and urban music.
Oh,
So
wow.
at the end of college, I was in my last year of college. And of course, I knew their skin tones were the skin tones, but I never associated the sounds of music with the color of skin.
Yeah.
And so I'm in the end of college and I'm writing all these songs. And I didn't know anything about the music business. I didn't know about record labels. It didn't occur to me that I would want one or get one. But one of my friends said, let's go record all the songs you've written. I bet you I can get you a record deal in 1 year. And I was like, oh, that sounds ridiculous. It sounds very hip hop and street. And I'm not, I want to sing at Lincoln Center.
Yeah.
So we record this album. He brings it to the different record labels in New York City where we lived. And I got a record deal in much less than a year. He walks me, and I'm making a long story short, but he
Yeah.
walks
Yeah.
me record label, and I got signed the day I walked in. So that was the beginning
Okay.
of me being in the business, so to speak.
So you were just like, did you have a goal at that point? I mean, you were in school, obviously I feel, and I could be projecting, but I feel like you were just there literally following your curiosity and kind of seeing where it would go.
Exactly. And I didn't know
Interesting.
that curiosity went places. So I was just questioning everything. I didn't realize that I was following something. And so that can be very dangerous, of course, because it can lead you somewhere. And people can see your inquisitiveness and say, oh, I can show her another answer.
Mm.
And because you're so curious, you follow that answer. But yeah, I was in school following my curiosity. My favorite thing to do, performance wise, was to do jazz standards.
Okay.
And there were so many opportunities in New York to just go places and sing.
Yeah.
That was a lot of fun for me.
And then, so what was that time of your life like? Like, I don't know if it was on another interview or something I read, but you mentioned something where the visual I had was you're sitting kind of in at a long table, and like Rihanna was there, and it's like you're just now that I know about this curiosity, like I can see I see another angle to what you shared, because you're listening to like what they were saying and how they were reacting and so forth. Like, what was that? Because many of us just don't have that vision of what that world looks like. So what were those early days like for you?
Sure. So in school at the end, because you're in New York City, you can produce shows wherever you want to produce shows. And because you're a college student, people give you a lot of leeway to kind of play in their venues. And
Mm.
so we'd produce shows. By the time I got signed, it was me, Rihanna, Justin Bieber, and Mariah Carey, and then Rick Ross and Jay-Z. So it was this myriad of like just totally, completely different styles. Neo was there,
No kidding.
and they were all really curious.
Okay.
I mean, like insistently, insanely curious. Rihanna was funny and spunky. Jay-Z was very zen, and his questions were about life and why do you
Huh.
think that and why would you do that? Rick Ross's questions were about, I'll keep it short with Rick Ross, but kind of about luxury and how you get there.
Mm.
what you can utilize in order to improve your quality of life. And Justin Bieber was jumping on top of couches and jumping down from them.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, it was this. Mariah Carey was known as a diva. That was what people knew her to be. But she stood on what she believed. She asked for what she wanted, and she created the most incredible, and I'll use this word, excellent art. And so because of that, she did very well in the business of music.
Yeah.
So those were the people I was around. And then you have your godmama, Patti LaBelle, telling you everything's going to be all right. You've got Lionel Richie giving you advice whenever you get to see him. So that's what it actually looked like.
Okay.
The business side bored me. It still does.
Well said. I love the right to the point.
Yeah.
So everything was going well, essentially, right? Felt like, did you feel like you were in a good place creatively as well? And you're clearly surrounded by some pretty remarkable humans to, I'm assuming, help just surface a lot of your best work, right?
Yeah. What I learned from those particular humans is if you think it's right, I'm not saying that's the greatest idea, but in the art space, you kind of have to trust that if you like something, that's okay.
Yeah.
And we would see Rihanna walk into a room, hear like 20 songs, pick two, and decide what her single was in that moment. I would walk into a room with an orchestra and a jazz ensemble and decide what chords that they were going to play and decide the lyrics. And I would have to leave it there. I couldn't pick it up and fix it. That's not the opportunity you get in the business. So yeah, they opened up my creativity. They allowed me to explore, but they also expected me to explore. That was kind of like the rule is that you explore. It's almost rude not to.
Okay. And then I don't want to spend, to be honest, I don't want to spend a lot of time on what you probably know what I'm going to bring up, because it's just, I'm bothered by our society these days and how people treat others. But it's obviously, it's part of your journey and your story. And I imagine even, the who are you question, probably really it's loud and clear at that
Same
moment.
answer.
Same. I love that. I love that.
Terribly. I mean, that's why I said it can lead you places, and you get there and you're like, oh my gosh, this is because I asked why, isn't it?
Yes.
This is because I asked how.
Yeah.
This is because I asked who. And how many years ago? Okay, 7 years later.
Yeah.
I'm able to know that. I'm able to know that curiosity and the interest in why people think the way they think, and whether or not we can get along, whether or not we can have a conversation, brought me to that place. Panic also brought me there.
Well, I was going to ask, like, how, because to answer questions like that, usually you have to try to get yourself out of a survival state, like set of emotions, and knowing, and we'll fill the audience in a second on the event, obviously, but knowing that, like, what happened, I know for myself, and I feel like I've got access to a lot of mental fitness practices, that would have been really challenging. Like, I really would have had to figure out, okay, like, how do I let my mind breathe long enough without jumping into panic or stress and survival mode to actually get some of that clarity around a question like why, right? And also not fall into a why of, because I think why questions are helpful to learn from, but they're tricky that we can get stuck in the loop. Like, why me? Why me?
I
right?
wanted to know why Donald Trump thought like he thought. When I say
I see what you're saying. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's fill the audience.
I was
Because
going
they're
to say,
like, what the hell are they talking about?
Yeah.
It's
the 2016 elections, and we have Hillary Clinton and we have Donald Trump that we're voting for. Long story short, because now we have like Marianne Williamson and Nikki Haley. But so they were kind of up against each other. And when Donald Trump said, grab him by the PUSSY, I couldn't understand why the heart didn't matter as much as politics. I couldn't understand why the heart didn't matter much as conservatism. I couldn't understand why it didn't matter as much as democracy. I couldn't understand why it didn't matter as much as social. Like whatever your belief system is about government, I couldn't understand why it was okay for him to be comfortable saying, grab him by the pussy. And that statement, along with so many other things, put me into a state of panic because my question was, what are our American principles as human beings? Are we a Christian nation? Are we absolutely not? What are our standards? And then you have, we get introduced to so many other things like Buddhism and like just whatever we decide to explore. But if this nation refers to itself as this Christian nation, and the evangelicals have decided that this is the right candidate, what do we believe?
Yeah, what does that
mean? And how is that showing up right now? And I couldn't understand it. And it plagued me because as a Christian, I felt like people were kind of playing around with that word in order to get, whether it be votes or just people on their side. I hated it. If he would have said he was Buddhist, I would have felt the same way. I would say, well, with these principles, how are you?
There's a misalignment here.
It's what are you aligned with?
Yeah.
And if we're talking about the way that America is run, what part of that are you aligned with? It just seemed like there was no alignment anywhere. And I felt like the country was going to be in disarray if he became the president. It wasn't necessarily that I didn't believe in the conservative principles or some of the Republican ideas. Yeah. It was, why is this man allowed to be referred to as the president of the United States when he thinks the way he does? So I get a phone call. Would you like to sing at the inauguration? And they're like, we'd like you to do, entertainment, some jazz standards. And I'm like, I would love to sing at the inauguration, but I cannot entertain. It has to be lyrics or words that mean something. And so I called up a friend, Travis Green. I called up a couple of friends and I said, hey, can we sing this song? It's called Intentional. And it's kind of a hopeful song because I had felt like in that moment, Christians were losing hope, fighting each other, being devastated. And I said, what better, bigger stage can I go on to sing a message of hope, even though things look hopeless right now? So that was my, I'm going to use the word intention. That was my intention. But my mom always says you have to have more than good intentions. You've got to have some wisdom.
Sure.
You've got to have some reality. Do you know what I mean? And that was the time when I realized you don't get to panic and freak your way out into singing a song and then say, I wanted to make the world a better place. Like, you're not allowed.
Yeah.
So that's kind of what we're talking about is sort of what led me to that. Singing on that stage got me canceled. The Christian community did not say, well, she was singing one of our songs, so it's okay. Yeah, they got me canceled. And I'm a secular artist. So I'm a soul and R&B singer. So nobody even thought, oh, this Christian girl, God bless her. She had the right. No. Yeah. So that's the story.
When did you know, Chrisette, that like, oh shit, this is not going the way at least I was mapping it out of my mind, and like the whole mission behind the message and bringing people together was out the window?
Yeah. Please allow me to call myself a name here. I felt like an idiot that it took me so long to realize that. I felt like prideful that it took me so long to realize that. What makes you think that just because you meant well, you did well? And that concept right there took me probably 6 months to be like, Chrisette, it didn't work and you did a bad job. Nobody I had to turn off social media and the news and all that kind of stuff immediately. Change my number immediately. I was getting phone calls from different continents on my personal phone. Wow. So I had to turn off the noise right away. I just couldn't handle the noise. But I knew the noise was there and there was noise in my head. So it took about 6 months to be like, you really didn't do what you wanted to do, what you meant to do didn't occur. And now it's time to see what did occur. Let's take a look at what did occur and how much of that were you involved with. It took about 6 months.
Okay. I definitely want to, because I think this is helpful from the practice standpoint to dive into during that time, like how you were able to quiet some of the noise. 'Cause, I mean, the other thing I feel like I should point this out if people aren't picking, you sang 2 times before for President Barack Obama, and like that's obviously completely, forgotten about in a blink of an eye, which that's why I had mentioned before. It's like it's just I'm disappointed in us as society and how we treat people, right?
Yeah.
And how we just jump to such judgment right away. So
Yeah,
how
I
did
was
like because
disappointed too. And that's what I had
yeah.
spent those first 6 months being was they didn't hear anything I said. They didn't see
Mm,
when I went to Iraq and sang for the troops. They didn't see when I sang for Obama. They didn't see me and Michelle Obama at my show. They didn't see
yeah,
me sing for Singapore. That like nothing I ever did made any sense.
yeah.
That was the first 6 months. Um, I had decided to call that pride only because you don't get to live there.
Mm,
Like I wanted to live there. I was right. I meant well, but I wouldn't have been able to. Maybe I'm wrong, but I don't feel like I would have been able to get to my next step in life if I stayed on, how people say stand 10 toes down on what you believe. I've seen that not work.
yeah, yeah. So were any of those people that you mentioned before still around to support at all? Like that maybe heard past the noise and was like, okay, like let's talk this through? Or did you have any other practices and journaling or anything like that that helped?
Yeah, so it was yoga right away. It
Okay.
wasn't church
Yeah.
because I felt like I sang your song, you didn't even see me.
Yeah.
Um, so it was yoga right away. And it was 300 hours of yoga immediately in an intensive course in New York City in a basement studio where you just couldn't hear anything from outside. Uh,
Mm,
and I did that for months, every single day, Monday to Friday, 6 hours a day. And that's when it got really quiet. Um, that's when I began to pray again because I didn't really have any questions for God for those first 6 months. It wasn't like, God, what's going on? I felt
yeah.
like He knows what's going on. I don't really want to know what's going on because it seems dangerous here.
Yeah.
Yeah, like don't even tell me. Just, whatever's going on, just make sure I'm safe, please. And
Yeah.
I was scared to go to the grocery store at those first 6 months. I was scared to walk outside because the threats were really scary.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Yeah.
we get to yoga. I'm driving myself back and forth. There's a garage right next to the yoga studio, and you can stay there all day, so you're safe. And there was a Yogi Charu who kind of walked us through just non-attachment. I think non-attachment kind of saved my life a little because it
Mm,
let me not be attached to outcomes and to the outcome so that I could remove myself from the outcome and really get involved with what was going on the inside. And I found out a lot of bad things about myself that I needed to fix and work on. And I found out a lot of bad things about my culture that I got to be upset about, that I didn't realize, I ever needed to think about. I like to glaze over everything, but people are really mean. I got to admit that.
yeah. Yeah. So I mean, I know you said that you would answer the "Who are you?" question in the exact same way, and I do believe that. But I also there's got to be some elements there where, I mean, you've definitely grown as a person. It would be nearly impossible not to go through that reflection, and in everything you just described, it seems like there's so many little nuggets of wisdom that you picked up. But is there anything that really sticks out for you as a person that you've kind of gleamed from that whole experience, helping you now in your next chapter, essentially?
Yeah, you're not welcome everywhere. And you don't have to be afraid of rejection. I was petrified of rejection before that. And so being rejected by people who essentially looked like me, before that, I didn't say things like by people who looked like me. I didn't say things like the Black community. It wasn't. But this time, I realized that there are people who identify with me, who will hate me, who identify as me and will hate me. And I have to be okay with that. I have to be okay with thinking differently. I have to be okay with having to have wanted to meet Trump. I wanted to meet him. I wanted to look at him. I wanted to ask him questions. I have to be okay with the fact that I'm inquisitive. It's embarrassing sometimes. That was embarrassing. It was embarrassing to have wanted to do that and to have to admit that I wanted to. People are going to hate some of those things about me. So that's the biggest takeaway, is that everybody doesn't like you. Just because you're smiling, you're nice, and the whole yoga thing, like, people are still gonna hate you. And that has been my
that's
biggest
not for you to
takeaway.
hold, like you don't
Say it
have to
again.
hold. That's not for you to hold. Like, you don't have to hold that energy.
But
Or that's kind of what I'm picking up from what you're saying. It's like,
yeah, I don't
it's
have
speaking
to. I don't.
facts,
Yeah,
you know?
yeah. And I saw a lot of people say things like, "My haters are my motivators," and they'll wag their finger around. I'm like, I don't know if I'm motivated by haters, but I'm definitely not broken by them anymore. You
Mm,
know, they don't they don't kill me.
yeah.
So
So then what
I don't.
happened next? Like, you came out of 300 plus hours of yoga training. Obviously that's, where the certification came from as well, and so forth. Like,
Mhm.
what what did life look and feel like around that? Because the label had, I think, dropped you at that point, right? Or you left, or I'm not sure the exact
That was
details.
my last. That was my last record with the label. I had already been released from the label, but I had another record deal with Capitol Records.
Hmm.
And I think what's really funny is I went into depression after getting those 300 hours of yoga. I think
Okay.
it's because I was able to face that I was sad. It was
I
like, oh,
Yes.
this is sadness and it hurts. And I
Yeah.
sat in that for 2 years. I sat in it like without apology. I am depressed. And it was really okay. So I hadn't cried for years before that. Industry will, get you some tough skin. And I hadn't cried for years. I was in therapy. I was in 3 kinds of therapy.
Okay.
And I sat on the couch one day and I began to cry. I said, "Oh my God." I said, "Look, I'm crying. I'm really upset." And I'm kind of silly. So she knew, like, Chrisette's going to make a joke out of this, but it was real. I
Yeah.
was so sad and so full of feeling. And sitting with feeling was, God, a mix between torture and alignment. It was like, it could hurt really bad, but I knew it was real.
Yeah.
And that was exciting for me to feel something real, even if it was pain. But yeah, after the whole let's get aligned thing, I got aligned with being uncomfortable.
Well, you
Very.
got yeah, but if this was 10 years ago, I would not be able to kind of empathize with that, or relate to what you're saying. But having now worked in mental fitness and having gone through my own journey, I totally understand what you're saying. It's like these practices and modalities. Usually for the most part, we stop numbing ourselves. And there's
Um,
many different ways, obviously, to do that. Uh, there's so many different ways, just not to feel the feels, essentially. Then all of a sudden we pick up these practices that are designed to do the complete opposite, and you feel everything. And I remember for me it was anxiety. I'm like, what is this? Like this, I feel worse doing these practices
yeah,
now, until getting to the point where I think where you got to as well, where this is scary, but us also feels very aligned. And like, there's something about it that like, okay, well, maybe this is actually how we're designed to operate and feel when we
Yeah.
remove all of that, those numbing agents and whatnot.
Yeah. God
Yeah.
bless my husband at the time. He stayed in disappointment, and this is not fair, and you shouldn't have to go through this, and you shouldn't be treated this way. And it pulled us apart ridiculously.
Yeah. Because you got
Because
married right around that. It was
I
very close,
literally
right?
got married a year before this all happened, and we got divorced a year after it happened.
Okay.
So it was a really quick, and we don't have to go into
Yeah.
how the marriage happened and all that, but it was a really quick experience.
Yeah.
And the depression was so heavy. And I had seen depression my whole life, bipolar depression, in two of my family members, that it was diagnosably bad to where I got diagnosed with bipolar type 2. And it was like a little trophy for me because I got to say to my brother, I'm crazy too. It's not just you. You were yelling too much as a kid. It's not just you.
Yeah.
But it gave me tools. It gave me tools like cognitive behavioral therapy and a program. We introduced me to medicine, but I was like, if I eat enough quinoa and, have enough kale, I'm sure we could click a button in my brain that turns bipolar off. And
How did
my
that
truth
go?
is that no, it doesn't turn off. You stay bipolar. But some people decide to be bipolar and not still do the work. And some people decide to be bipolar and still be on a path to wellness. Stay there. When I got diagnosed with bipolar, though, there's this concept or this idea in bipolarism called grandiosity, where you think you can do anything, you can save the world. So a lot of my friends in the industry who are bipolar or, people who kind of live lives that are kind of loud and are bipolar, they have this idea that they can do that. And so I just learned a lot about myself when I was depressed. Diagnosis that really helped me to understand depression and to live with it in a really healthy, kind of fun, if I'm honest, way.
Okay. Were you still recording or making any music throughout those years?
I didn't want to.
Okay.
Because I didn't want to sing sad songs.
Yeah. So
I had
when
always,
did it flip? What was there a moment for you where you felt, I'm assuming there was a moment where you're like, I'm ready now to sing again and create and
a few weeks ago.
really?
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. And I still don't really want to create, not music.
Okay.
I want to create conversations now. So my brother's also a songwriter. I said, Little, just write everything you know about me down, make songs out of it, and then make me come to the studio and sing the songs. Because music is a part of my community or my tribe that I've grown over the years, and I don't want to be selfish. I still have a gift to sing and to perform, so I don't want to be selfish and kind of not give them something, even though I don't really have a great desire to create music. Yeah, that's the best way I can put it. I still have a desire to create, but music it's almost too loud now. It's like, is the song still playing? Do you know?
Do you think it's too painful? Or you just like
I
it's just
think
a
about
chapter
that.
close?
My pastor brought that out once in a sermon, and I sat and I thought about it. I said, am I hurt? He said, because bitterness kind of gets in the way of your offering. I think it's just boring now. And I'm sure that there'll be some discovery there. And I can still write songs. I just feel like there's so much more to do now. I've found so many issues that I need to understand like before.
Yeah.
And now I would feel like I was doing myself like I want to farm and I want some horses and I want a homestead. There's just so much that I still am excited about. like I was excited about music years ago. I'm just not excited about music. It doesn't excite me. But it excites my brother.
Well, I mean, this is only an N of two, but I mentioned before we're recording, and some of the listeners might know this or remember when I was doing this, but when I recorded a pilot episode of a film series with Mia Martina, like she went through, a pretty traumatic experience in the music industry and had to let some of that go. And, present day is like different words, but basically saying the same thing. Like she's, she wrote a book. She's got another book coming. We're actually hosting a podcast. There's a bit of an experiment together. And I mean, there's still some music, but I feel like it's the same sentiment. But for someone that is not in the industry, that I remember being behind the board, just listening to, because the second day we filmed in a studio, just even listening to Mia hum, it just stopped. It stopped the room. And I've been listening to your music, religiously for the last couple weeks and on repeat. And it's hard to, like, I feel like from like outsiders from the industry, because you can hear and obviously why you're winning Grammys and your music is so popular, you have such a beautiful talent.
Thank
It's
you.
like it's like, but you have to sing. Like I want to say that, but then there's the other side of it from like the work. It's like, but no, you have to do what like lights up your soul.
Yeah.
So please sing.
People light up my soul. People light up my soul.
Yeah.
And just because you don't like bananas doesn't mean you don't give them to your child, right?
Yeah.
I'm not going to smash my bananas up to eat them, but if you want this music because I love you so much, I'll give it to you. It just doesn't take up my thoughts, maybe like it used to.
Yeah.
And it's business now. I've learned how to create business with music, and so now I understand that people receive music in spurts, and you can give somebody an album, and you don't have to do that again for a year or two. Yeah. So it's just not always on my mind.
Yeah. But what is on your mind and I can see this so clearly now, like your curiosity through line for your body and soul. This new podcast that you're launching. I mean, I'm biased, of course, given I've hosted at several shows, but like, what a beautiful way to fuel that curiosity and exercise that muscle, and just still really impact society through your words and your art and your craft. So why don't you tell us a little bit about the show and what it's all about and kind of how it came about?
Yeah. Comeback Sis, I originally thought if I could do a show where I give people all the tools I wish I had when I was in that state of depression, how does that look? What does that look like? And so we started interviewing people, and it all happened kind of fast. I had come up with a few concepts over the years, and then one of my management teammates was like, "You have to do a podcast." And so I went through a list of things that I needed in order to do it, and he went and got those things, and I was like, "I guess I got to do this podcast." Just like the music business, they were like, "You have to get a record label." I'm like, "You figure it out. If it works, it works." That's kind of just how I am with stuff.
I like it.
So yeah, I start getting into these interviews, and I'm hearing people go through horrible, I mean, really uncomfortable things. Having had good intentions, most good intentions usually have to do with protecting the self. And then that turns into, oh gosh, I hate to say this, a community. So I need to protect myself. Everything's good. Maybe I'm infertile and I can't have children. So I need to change my diet. Now you're on Instagram being a diet expert. It usually starts with figuring something out with yourself and then giving it to other people. And so people had these, I'm talking about horrible stories, and they turn their stories into offerings. And that seemed to be the common thread with people who make it through discomfort. is this discomfort is going to become wisdom, and I'm going to be able to give that wisdom to other people. So I became super fascinated with, if I'm honest, how transparent and vulnerable people were. Mm-hmm. My time in the music industry, I hated interviews because when I first got started, there was a lot of, back then we didn't call it this, but clickbait. So they'd ask you a terrible question and then highlight the answer, and that would be all people heard. And you would just continue to feel misunderstood, and you would wonder if anybody knew you actually sang songs. And
terrible.
So, it was that's the worst part of the industry, if you ask me, is the misrepresentation of people's hearts. It's like, no, this person is a songwriter, and this is what the song says. But I got to ask people questions, and I was surprised how vulnerable they were because of my lack of vulnerability in interviews for fear of being exploited. And it has become a treasure to me. I can't wait to share it to anybody who's been through something, letting them know they're not alone, and letting them know that I hate this term, but they'll figure it out.
Yeah.
Because when you're figuring it out, it feels like forever. Yeah. For me, depression felt like my lifestyle. I was like, okay, I'm depressed. I wake up really late in the daytime. I went on a raw vegan diet during that time, and I began to align my body. This might sound crazy to some, but with the moon, and my cycle became aligned with the moon. I just followed a lot of instructions from my yogi. And I began to wake up. My circadian rhythm, which is off when you're bipolar, became very aligned and, for lack of a better term, normal. So there are things that you can do in whatever you're going through, that small changes begin to align you with the day, for lack of a better way to say it.
Well, it may not be the quinoa and the kale, but the moon definitely, that can definitely help. There's so many, I wrote up, there was a chapter in my book about just moon energy and whatnot. And just, even if you're super skeptical about all of this stuff, like feel like you just have to zoom out and think about, well, if the moon is literally pulling the ocean around, surely there's something going on here that we may not understand, that is a little bit above our, technology or intellect or something like that. And there's just so many, but this is where the curiosity comes in, right? Like if you're curious and you can ask questions like that and try things without judgment, then like, what do you have to lose?
If your body responds to the moon, it responds to the moon.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to be spiritual.
Yeah.
And it doesn't have to be religious. And it doesn't have to be, you don't have to become an alchemist. Although I used to call myself God's little alchemist. When I started eating foods that balanced the water in my body, you could feel the moon pulling on you and kind of putting you into rest. And when you're, as a woman, when your cycle literally changes as the moon changes and becomes what it becomes based on the moon's cycle, you don't have to really ask questions.
Yeah, for sure. If there's enough evidence there. Wow.
Yeah. So I think it's a beautiful thing to study and to look at. When your body suddenly starts to wake up with the sun, as opposed to hating the sun because it got up before you. Now you marvel at kind of being a part of what's going on.
Yeah.
And so depression is kind of about not being a part of what's going on. But when you begin to align with just your biological makeup, scientifically, if we want to call it science, and the way that the atmosphere works, it helps you to come out of your shell.
Yeah.
Isn't that exciting?
Is there anywhere you would point people that would be interested in learning more? Like, did you have any good resources or things to search to like kind of dive into this a little bit more?
Yeah, a lot actually. I'd say two things: get some plants, buy plants, house plants, and put them in the soil and see how the soil affects the plants. and start mixing soil and seeing, okay, well, this one works better with sand, and this plant works better with some wood chips and this type of plant.
Okay.
And then begin to think about how oxygen and water helps the plants to grow. I had at one point 28 house plants. Some were tropical, some were not.
Yeah.
And I had so much fun growing them and playing with them. And I began to identify with them. And the other side of it is, in the grocery store, buy what you're attracted to. So hang out in the produce section. And I won't say preferably one section over another, although I would prefer organic, but hang out in the grocery store and pick things up and smell them and just buy what you're attracted to in the produce section, and then go home and play with what you've bought.
I'm glad you added in the produce section, because I could see people like, oh, great, I'm in the middle of the grocery store and there's a lot calling my name, but that's not the
I
same
didn't want to be
energy.
judgmental. Just want to send you to one little area. I found out that I was attracted at first to different colored things. So for me, in the beginning, it was red. And I was so excited to buy raspberries. And then I would have to find out, how were tomatoes made? And I found out that I responded better to tomatoes that I made in my little garden at the house in an apartment than the ones at the grocery store. And why is that? So I playing with food and playing with dirt is really helpful.
I love it.
I hope that's not too weird. I hope it helps somebody.
No, you've come to the right show. There's no level of weird that is not accepted here. That's for sure. I want to respect your time. Start wrapping up. Like what's got you really excited, or what's got you smiling day to day these days?
Really, fashion. I love to play in clothes. It's so freaking fun. I've stopped apologizing about that just recently. I love bell bottoms and rocker tees and fun big stone rings. I love to play in fashion. I think that's one thing that really was fun in the music industry, is that you didn't have to apologize for going to the store or going into the vintage shop and like having things remade. But fashion makes me smile a lot. My brother is back in my life. He was addicted to alcohol.
Okay.
And for about 15 years, we didn't have normal conversation. He became an AA warrior. He started giving motivational speeches to other people. And when we went to go record the podcast, because he's great with singing, songwriting, and technology, he recorded it. And I would watch him because I didn't know this person. And he would go in the kitchen and say, "Is there any tea in here?" He'd be like, "Tea? He wants tea?" And I'm his big sister. "Somebody go get him all the tea." You know, I was just my brother being in my life and working with me has made the business of the music industry a lot more fun and rejuvenated, because I get to see it through his eyes. So fashion and my brother have been lighting me up lately. And water fasting, weirdly enough, I don't know what it is about this time of the year, but you just feel so cleared in January. You just want to clear out. I don't know what that's about. But water fasting has been kind of a fun experiment. So we're playing with that right now.
How long do you, I was just at someone's house yesterday who did a 6-day water fast, and it was quite interesting to hear the journey of that. I mean, he was super pumped about it, but it's definitely not easy at certain points. But his journey was, I can't remember, I want to say day 4 for him was, wow, it's like he was just firing all of a sudden. Like it was like a whole other world. What's your fast look like? Or what are you playing with? Or
kind of the same thing. And that's what I'm hearing from all my friends who I don't know why not everybody, but so many people just gravitated towards water this year.
Yeah, what's going on?
It started with, what is it? Wineary, or where you don't drink wine.
Yeah.
Whatever it was. And then people were like, I'm just going to go with water. So I started suddenly, I have like all these different kind of really fun cell cleansers that friends have made and blood nourishers.
Okay.
I just started walking into friends who were like, I've got chlorophyll from so-and-so. So it was one of those moments where there was a lot of alignment suddenly.
Yeah.
But the journey looks like Now, everybody shouldn't do this, and a lot of people don't agree with it. But for me, salt water flushes in the morning for the first 3 days, or maybe day 2, 3, and 4. Oh gosh, your community knows that clearing out makes you so aware of what's in you.
Yeah.
And there's a such thing as kind of getting addicted to wellness, and it can be healthy or not. But when you feel clear like that, and it's day 4, like your friend said, and you're sharp, and you're available to conversation or to curiosity.
Yeah, I feel that.
It can be a little, because I try not to get big-headed, but some things kind of get you into big-headedness, like, oh my God, I can figure out the cure to that starts to happen. And so you want to get rid of more things that don't belong in your body, whatever's been sitting in there.
Yeah. We don't think about that often, right? Like we have a lifetime of accumulating experiences, emotions, energy blocks, toxins, all of this stuff, right? But we often don't like clean up the house, and it's just because we don't see it. So it's
So when you saw order flush in the morning,
you see it.
you'll see it.
You see it. There it is. House is clean.
And you'll say, no more of that. And so maybe your friend mentioned mucus.
Yeah. Fascinating.
So
I'm intrigued. I'm curious.
Yeah. Just
I'll remember though. Like, that's what she's talking about. Okay, last question for you. If you were recording an album right now, what would that album title be for you?
Come Back Sis. And we are recording one. In front of my brother's eyes. My brother's really cool. He knows, like, when I make a face, what I'm thinking. I'm like, well, just write that down for me, please.
I love it.
That in and of itself is just so stinking cool, because he's seen everything I've been through. Whether we were talking a lot or not, he saw it, and he felt it. He came and drove the car up to my house to pull me out of my divorce. He grabbed the coffee grinders with me. He can write about that, and he loves my voice, and he thinks it's really cool and special. And he knows every note that I hit, and he knows all my riffs. So having him write my life down for me, and having the honor of hearing myself the way he hears it. By the way, that's a thing in the music business. Songwriters come and hang out with you all the time, have a conversation, and write a song about you. And you're like, is that what I said? And they're like, yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. So Come Back Sis is the name of the album.
Okay.
It's the name of the book. But first, it's the name of the podcast.
I can't wait. You are just one beautiful, bright light in this world. And I just have goosebumps even expressing this. I'm just so grateful our paths have crossed, in that you're so open to sharing your story and sharing, just I think thoughts and observations that like many just would like I'll leave that to myself. But those are the things that I think many of us struggle with or think about, and to hear you to share, open and with vulnerability is really beautiful to experience, and I think people can feel. I mean, I can feel it. You can feel that energy, and I just can't wait to experience more of your creations and your messages into this world. They're so important. So thank you for that.
Thank you so much. You'll see me cry on the podcast and be really upset about some things. So
sure.
We'll mix it up.
Stay tuned. Well, thank you.